Good morning, Clemens. It is 9 a.m. here in the UK where the Raspberry Pi event is taking place. And how are you, Clemens, this morning?
I'm fine, thank you. And how are you in London?
I'm great, thanks. It's a bit crazy that I'm talking to you from London and you're in France. And it's actually 9 a.m. where you are. It's 8 a.m. where I am. So this is the Raspberry Pi event happening, this annual event happening in London in the UK this year, not Cambridge as normal.
Yeah, so I heard. So you have a large room.
Yeah, it's I'm taking a walk around because as one does, it's very hectic today. We are going to visit the Sony factory tomorrow, so there will be transport from here to there. But it's not about what I'm doing. Today is what about you're doing, because Clemens, you've been with Elektor for a long time, and whenever we have private chats on Teams or WhatsApp, I always am fascinated by your depth of experience and knowledge and how far you go back with Elektor. And you've written so many articles, and you've had so much expertise, both in analog and digital, Arduino, and so many analog circuits that you've done. If I could I ask you how you got started with Elektor?
Oh, that was a friend of my father, actually.
Okay.
He was a biologist, and he an inventor, sort of guy who made machines for doing measurements in biology. And he used electronics in his devices. And he had a collection of magazines, and then he moved to Sweden. And when he moved to Sweden, he left me his magazine collection. And so I got 3 meters or so, or 4 of electronic magazines, including Elector. And so that's how I started, I think, with Elector.
And what year was that?
Well, that was, say, 1980.
1980, wow. That's before my legacy. I mean, I bought my first Elector in 1990. And you inherited a large stack of magazines, which are all on the thumb drive now, about this big.
Yeah. Actually, I have taken the time to go through the old ones. And I remember the circuits, some of the circuits. I rediscovered a circuit I built at the time.
Yeah.
I've lost since. Yeah.
Summer circuits always a popular hit. And I'm wondering, in those days, 1980, by 1990, well, actually, to be fair, the first Elektor circuit that I built was completely analog, the SVHS to RGB converter. But I'm really not an analog guy. In 1980, when you started tinkering, was it mostly analog, or were you dabbling in microcontrollers by that time?
My first circuit, I think, was an NE555. I had a model train and need a flashlight for it, flashing, and that's what I built. I was immediately interested in digital electronics, and in all these electrodes at the time, 1980, everything before from 1975 and newer, I considered recent.
Yeah.
And that logic started, sort of, so you had circuits and explanations, etc. And so that really interested me a lot. I didn't understand a lot about transistors and all that stuff.
Yeah. And you'll excuse me, I've come outside because at this Raspberry Pi event, there's a bit of noise going on. Everyone's moving on because, as I said, we're going to visit the Sony factory in Wales. So I've had to step outside. I'm using a tablet instead of a laptop for more mobility. And so yeah, we are. Welcome to England, Clemens. You were here with me last time on Raspberry Pi event last year. And since things have moved more digital rather than analog, you've become more of the Arduino guy. You prefer Arduino to Raspberry Pi, is that right?
Oh, yes, definitely. I shouldn't say that too loud, I think, but...
well, now, listening.
But the problem, it's not a problem, but Raspberry Pi is too much computing. Yeah. And I like tinkering with small things. And So I prefer small microcontrollers to those big ones.
Yeah, I started on Arduino when it came to the time of coming back to embedded, because prior to that I was doing, I don't know, 8051 variants and flashing them from parallel port on PC with the Mosey and the Miso and the, but Arduino just made it easier with the USB. So I did do projects with Arduino, and you know, it's perfect for my situation. I needed a bathroom scale to upload data to the internet via Wi-Fi, which needed an ESP8266 at the time because it didn't come with built-in Wi-Fi. But if that's all you needed, Arduino was fine. And I remember my friend having a Raspberry Pi and saying, Arduino is it's not enough. And I remember saying the Raspberry Pi is too much, but I guess it's what you need it for. A lot of people get Raspberry Pis and they just use it to play like retro games, or use it as a multimedia player like for Kodi. You've got some Raspberry Pis, I'm sure. What were your main use cases?
Actually, I have a whole bunch of Raspberry Pis, but I never use them. I have only one Raspberry Pi in use, which is doing some home automation. And all the other Raspberry Pis, I just have them, well, they sort of dripped into my lab, my office, and so I have them. And I need them sometimes to check a circuit somebody sends in a Raspberry Pi thing. Then I can check it if it works. But really, I never use Raspberry Pi.
Well, so there's that friend of mine I told you about who thought the Arduino wasn't enough, and I thought the Raspberry Pi was too much. He's actually using both in his home, like to monitor the thermostat and switch the water heater, or geyser as we call it, on and off. He was using that's the Arduino, but the Raspberry Pi is running object detection and image recognition. I'm not sure how much analog he's doing. Probably not too much, except for connecting analog sensors to the inputs of the Arduino or the Raspberry Pi. But you did mention a 555 timer, right?
Yeah, that's of course the new transistor, sort of. Well, not new, but it's
555 timer is a classic. I mean, we still publish articles about the 555 timer, and that was something that students had to learn about back in the day. I remember them battling to come up with monostable.
You're dropping out for me
And stuff like that.
You anymore.
So I'm gathering that you've used the 555 timer or two in your life. Not that many, but yes, of course I did. I seem to be losing you in the tunnel there, Clemens.
Sorry?
Seeing myself, but I'm not seeing you.
The connection is very bad. I can't hear you anymore. I still can see myself.
Clemens. Well, I can hear you. I can hear you, but I can't see you, Clemens.
I will try again.
Cool. Well, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I again am at the Raspberry Pi event in the UK. The partner event. There's a lot going on here, as you can hear by the noise behind me, and presentations about to happen. We have a couple of workshops happening later today, and you know, we seem to be having some internet hiccups. Let's try and get Clemens back on the stage. There we go. There's Clemens. Clemens, can you hear me?
Yes, everything is fine.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Clemens, I was asking about 555 timer. Have you had extensive experience in working with 555?
Well, what is extensive experience? I've used them like everybody else. Do some
Yeah, I've
stuff
used
with
them
it.
to flash LEDs and prove a point, but never really in an situation where I needed to have a 555 timer. So I'm more of a digital guy. I would probably just bring an Atmega 328P to the party to flash an LED rather than knowing how a 555 timer works. But you've used them extensively, I assume.
But yeah, that's the thing with microcontrollers. Of course, today you can do everything easier with the microcontroller. But in the long run, the microcontroller, if you want to change something, you have to keep the software around. You have to keep the tools around to make the software for the microcontroller. And if for some reason it dies and you have to replace it in 10 years' time, then you probably have to put in a new microcontroller with new software and everything new, which it's complicated. Whereas another 555, you just take another 555 and it works again.
Exactly. So you get another 555. It's exactly the same as the last 55, which is exactly the same as the one you got in 1980.
Yes.
But with microcontrollers, it's not quite as simple. And I feel your pain in that situation because, like I said, I've automated things, but then, for example, I gave my daughter the Wi-Fi password for her friend, just for that one friend, but that ended up getting shared all over the neighborhood and everyone was on our network. So I had to change the password. And it turns out that for my automation project, the Wi-Fi password was hard-coded into the firmware. So guess what? I had to rebuild the whole network and find the firmware. Even if it was 10 years old, I had to find it and change the password for that device. So yeah, you're right. 555 timer.
Would have helped you there a lot, I think.
Yeah, 555 timer has never given me a password issue.
No.
So, because you prefer Arduino to Raspberry Pi, I'm assuming that analog is more in your forte than digital.
No, I'm from I just missed the analog generation. I think I'm just after the analog generation, so I'm more into digital logic, microcontrollers, and op amps. And the whole real analog thing is I'm not good at. I'm trying to. I'm learning every day still, because there are some fun things to do, and it's better for your understanding. But it's I'm absolutely not an analog engineer. So I'm at ease with digital electronics. That's true.
Me too. I mean,
I have some experience with analog now, but I will more easily grab an op amp than a transistor.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. I never had an oscilloscope until like 2 years ago, but for digital logic, back in the 90s, I was using my PC's parallel port and writing programs in assembly to do logic monitoring of buses and stuff. But that's ones and zeros, so that's easy enough to monitor, and then look at the waveforms by creating a program in QBasic. Analog was always more difficult for me, and as I said, the first project I did for Elector was analog, PAL to RGB converter. That didn't mean I understood anything about it. It solved the problem I needed, and I built a circuit, and it solved the problem. But yeah, it was never really something I understood a lot about, those waveforms and the quadrature amplitude modulation of the colors in PAL. But I only started learning digital in the 90s, and just like you, Clemens, digital, I'm a lot more. It works or it doesn't work, and if it doesn't work, you can find out why it's not working. Analog, that's another story.
Well, you can find out too, analog, but you have to think differently, think harder. You cannot do a printf. You have to take out the multimeter, try to understand what's going on. Now I use to understand the circuits. I use a lot the LT Spice, and then try to simulate. And then in the simulate, you can easily measure everything and try to figure out what you should see, where currents are going, etc. That's a very good tool for that. But you need the right models.
Well, I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better. Like I said, I only got an oscilloscope 2 years ago, and prior to having a digital multimeter, I actually liked the needle. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but watching the needle on the analog multimeter, when you check the continuity and see the needle moving, that felt more real to me than watching this thing update 3 times a second. But I guess we have to get used to the future.
Well, yeah, that's really, is that the future? I mean, that's already the past.
That's true. But for me, it's the future. I mean, I still would like to get another analog multimeter, but so what you're saying then is that your tools are more digital than analog nowadays.
Well, of course, I still have an analog oscilloscope. I have an analog multimeter somewhere.
Yeah.
I still miss my old Russian multimeter. My first multimeter. It was a popular device in the 80s, in the Netherlands at least. Came in a metal case.
Yeah.
It was very big. It was a really big thing, black with a huge meter. Somehow I lost it. And that was my. I still miss it. I don't know why, but it's. I would like to have one. Of course, I have.
That's a good point made here by Nofal Al-Azawi. Every generation is happy with the level of abstraction they grew with. I guess that's why I miss my needle on my multimeter.
Yeah, maybe. So nowadays, oscilloscopes are all digital. Of course, I have a few of them. I never use my analog oscilloscope anymore, but I keep it around because you never know. Maybe someday. Multimeters have become that. My multimeter has been digital since I don't know when. Maybe since
but
the
you can
80s
still
already.
buy analog ones with needles for old people like me who like to see the needle move instantly and not wait for 3 samples a second.
Yeah, but the needle doesn't move instantly. It's a bit slow.
But you can see instant action.
Yeah, but on the multimeters you often have these bar graphs. So if you want some bar graph,
so
like
I'm using cheap digital multimeters, but I guess the industry standard that I've seen is Fluke. Do you have any Fluke instruments? They're heavily expensive though, so I don't.
Yeah, I got one.
Oh, nice.
Nope.
Very nice, Clemens. You see, that's I'm not sure I could justify that expenditure.
That's an expensive multimeter, but I got it very cheaply because it was clearance sale.
Okay.
I got it in a clearance sale online, and so it was still expensive. But I think this one, which if you bought it new, it could costed like 600 euros.
Geez, that is a heck of a lot. I mean, I have it.
Yeah, I paid only like 250 or so for it.
Still a lot for me.
It's a very good multimeter. The only thing is that it's batteries. It consumes a lot of batteries.
Really? Do you use rechargeables or you throw them away?
I throw them away. Okay. I'm tired of recharging batteries.
Yeah. The digital meters I have, even the analog meters I have, I would throw them away. But the difference is they would last a couple of years and not just go through them like as quickly as yours.
So I have to always switch it off. There's auto switches off automatically, but I always immediately after a measurement I switch it off so battery lasts longer.
Yeah. Me too with my Chinese meter. Sometimes if you get it on and then you definitely have to change the battery. So Clemens, when you joined Elektor, I'm curious, what was your first job?
I was Editor-in-Chief of France, the French edition.
So you were with the French
edition. France and sorry?
You were in France, and you're currently in France, and you're Dutch, which is quite a cultural difference. You're in France, you are Dutch. Elektor publishes in German, but initially started in Dutch. So you started with Elektor. How did they find you?
Well, I was an Elektor reader, and there was I saw an ad in the French edition that they were looking for someone who could do French and Dutch and knew about electronics. Oh. And the first time I thought, I could do that. but he didn't reply. Then the month later there was it again, and I still didn't reply. And then a month later there was it again, and then I said, okay, well, I'll send an email. And that's how it started.
And so what did you first do? Were you just editing, or did you write articles yourself immediately?
Well, I started a little bit with writing, of course, but it's mainly organizing the magazine. So it's rather a stressful job, actually. So every month you have to get because Elector is more Dutch German based, so you get all these articles in the wrong language, so you have to I had to get them translated. Then you have to do I had to do the plank, call it, placing the articles in the magazine with all the ads. At the time there were many more ads, and so that's a kind of a puzzle you had to solve every month. So you had to chase the translators, you had to try also to get in some own articles, of course, because it is the French market, which is different than the others.
Yeah.
You have to respond to the readers, the French readers. You have to go to the French exhibitions and the shows and companies, etc. So it's and you, of course, you have to check everything. And since I'm not French, well, I'm now, but it's not my mother tongue. It is very stressful to check the cover, for instance, and not to have stupid spelling mistakes on the cover and things like that. That's
yeah.
So that that's how it started. There was a lot of that's organizing, managing, getting the magazine out every month.
Yeah, and like I said, at this event, I brought a few Electors. For example, the most recent edition I brought in English, German, French, and Dutch, just to show the people here that we publish in all those different languages, including what you call the wrong languages, such as English. But that's my mother tongue. That's how I got into Elektor, was translating from German to English. I also happen to understand Dutch, but that's only because of the Afrikaans influence from the South African market. So you started with the French edition. Is there a big market for French electronics magazines? Or do people like also understand English a lot in the technical sphere in France?
Well, they have to, so they do, but many do not. As I still think, I've always said that France is a big market. We do not exploit it enough. It's electronics oriented country, high tech, a lot of high tech, especially in the south, and a lot of electronics education also. So many engineering schools and people into electronics. So there is definitely a market.
Yeah,
but it's also it's a different kind of market. It's not the same as German or Dutch or English. Every country has its own cultural approach of electronics. It's rather funny. But then to go into that market, you need, of course, the people, which is always a problem.
Well, I mean, you speak about the country, but the language transcends country boundaries. For example, I met a guy from the Ivory Coast here yesterday, and he was fascinated by the fact that we also publish in French, because the national language in the Ivory Coast in Africa and a lot of other countries in Africa is French. So, I happen to give him that edition, and I hope he remembers us and can buy the French edition of Elector. But it's not just France. Just like the English version is Britain, it's South Africa, it's Australia, New Zealand, United States. Amazingly, we have a Dutch market, which is such a small country, but they've had such a huge influence on this, on the industry and on the world. And you're originally Dutch, but now you're in France, right?
Yeah. When I started with Elector, not working at Elector, but reading Elector, so that was in the 80s, everybody knew Elector, also the people who were not into electronics.
Really?
In my at school, in my class, the people, they knew Elector. I had friends who bought Elector because they wanted to build something from Elector, but they had no clue about electronics. It was really a cultural thing. I don't think today everybody everybody in the Netherlands knows Elektor, but at the time it was really a well-known magazine.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised myself because, as I said, I bought my first Elektor in 1990. So, and that was on the shelves in magazine stores in South Africa. And I met a reader here who said it used to be at W.H. Smith in England, and you could just buy it off the shelf. And now you can't. So, a lot of magazines have gone the way of the dinosaur, but not Elektor. We keep going, but it's a lot of digital. So. Print publication, I like them. I really do. I like to open the magazine, feel it, have that tactile back and forth, being on a tablet like I am now. It doesn't work as well for me. Do you read Elektor every month still?
I have to get the paper edition, so I
Exactly.
won't read it on a computer or on a tablet.
Yeah.
In France, you can buy it in the shops, in the stores still. You can go to the supermarket and there you can buy Elektor.
Exactly, and in Germany. I mean, I'll be in Munich in 2 weeks with Elektor for Electronica, and yeah, I'm well aware that if I arrive at Frankfurt Airport, I can walk into a magazine store and there will be Elektor, just as in France, which I've done. I was in Paris earlier this year, but here I am in England, no Elektor on the shelves, and same in South Africa. But you know, as I was saying to Eric Janssen, one of our directors yesterday, it's prohibitively expensive shipping paper because that stuff is heavy. We'd like to sell them, but to get it there, it's very heavy to books and magazines.
It is.
Well, you know what?
We wanted to talk about electronics or about Elektor?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Probably boring our audience, talking about printing and publishing and magazine editions, but definitely I'm more interested in your electronics knowledge. So prior to Arduino, which you like, what were you doing to program on microcontrollers? Was it 8051? I mean, what other microcontrollers did we have? I don't know. I was using microprocessors, but in terms of microcontrollers, 8051 was my go-to.
Well, yeah, I did 8051, 52, the whole shit, but that's I really didn't like it. I started with the 6502. That was it's my favorite, one of my favorite. But of course, there was the PIC family. You had the PIC 84,
Oh yeah,
which was very popular in the beginning of when was it, 2000?
Yeah.
Which you could program from a parallel port, serial port. Remember, if I remember correctly. I used that. I also used a lot of Rabbit. Rabbit, it was a American company. It's now Digi, I think. It was bought over. They had a Z80 clone, and they added internet connectivity to it, networking connectivity, and that they had a good IDE for it. And I worked a lot with that. It was in my commercial career, not at Elector, I mean, in another business. There I used a lot of Rabbit, and of course also DSPs. I used the Motorola Shark family to do radar image processing and things like that. So I programmed, programmed a lot in C, in assembler at the time.
Are you still there, Clemens?
I'm still there. I'm talking. Okay, so what this is all dead again.
Sorry about that, Clemens. It seems to be some Wi-Fi issues here, which is weird because the Wi-Fi has been working great this entire week. So you mentioned the Rabbit. I'm aware of the 8051, which I used, and PIC. I like the PIC. You could get small 8-pin thick microcontrollers, and you could program them easily. Again, bit banging on a PC parallel port back in the day. But the Rabbit, I'm not so aware of that. 6502, yes, but that was more of a microprocessor than a microcontroller.
Yeah, the Rabbit, if you can hear me, was a Z80 clone.
Okay. Yeah.
But they added Ethernet to it, and that was in the time when I worked with it new. And it was a good way for us to get Ethernet connectivity into our systems, and we needed that to transport radar data. And so I said, besides the Rabbit, I also used the DSP Shark series from Analog Devices.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I use so many controllers and processors.
What year was the Rabbit?
The Rabbit was in early 2000s.
Okay. Well, that's pretty advanced to have Ethernet. Was it built into the chip, or was it a peripheral chip or something?
Now, they made those small modules. So you had a Rabbit processor with an Ethernet controller on it and a small connector.
Yeah.
Or an RG45 connector. And then what was good about it was that you got the whole library with Ethernet support and internet support. So you could do, it wasn't Wi-Fi, but it was wired internet, very practical. And they had a good IDE and all that stuff. So it was really easy to get up and running with that platform.
Yeah, and I joined a webinar with you a couple of years ago where you described serial ports, and that I understand very well because I have bit-bang serial ports on 8051, start bit, data bits, stop bit if necessary. How many data bits? I mean, who was using 7 bits anyway? Never saw that in action. But Ethernet is a whole different puppy, so I don't really understand Ethernet down to the ones and zeros down at the bottom layer. Do you?
Yes, well, I did. I don't know if I remember everything, but because at the time when I started with Ethernet, these libraries were not mature. So I spent a lot of time debugging and trying to figure out why sometimes data didn't get through, etc. And so I had to study all these protocols like ARP and all that low-level TCP/IP stuff. And I used UDP a lot. And so then you make up your own datagrams and things like that. So yes, I did do Ethernet to the bit level, but not anymore.
Well, it's impressive that you know that. I mean, I don't do serial at the bit level anymore on Arduino. I just open the serial connection and that's that. But there's a certain satisfaction knowing what's going on beyond the abstraction layer, down to the bit level. Do you know?
It does give you more control. It helps you understand why sometimes things are not working as they should. So it is good to have the basics, of course. If you just know the upper level, then if something small or something strange happens, then you may not know why.
And I'm old enough to remember token ring and Ethernet, well, networks with coaxial BNC connectors, which seems crazy now that I'm saying it in 2024. But now it's all unshielded twisted pair, or sometimes shielded twisted pair. Is there much difference for you from working? I guess the earliest one was 10 megabits per second, but now we have gigabit Ethernet and higher. Is it pretty much the same thing?
Yeah, the Ethernet, it's just the speed that changes, the medium that transports the data.
Yeah.
When I started working in France, the office network was coax.
Wow.
That is all.
Yeah, and I
installed Ethernet networks in Suriname, South America. There we run hundreds of meters of twisted pair, shielded twisted pair.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi, of course.
Well, the twisted pair obviously is useful in that it's a differential signal where you didn't have that on coax. And I was very used to coax, 75 ohm coax for video signals, but not really for sending signals over the network. But I guess in the United States, for example, they started putting the internet on the cable TV systems.
Yeah, you still can get it in France. You could get the cable internet. Don't know if you still can get it, but here they are. I think, guess everywhere they are replacing everything by fiber. So, but yeah, in big cities you could get internet on cable. In the Netherlands too, by the way. You can get the TV cable. Use the same for the internet.
Yeah, well, back when we were using modems, I mean, first they had acoustic couplers running at 300 bits per second, but that wasn't a hard connection. That was stick your phone in a couple of foam cups and get connection. I think the earliest modems were 1200 bits per second for home use anyway.
Yeah, I remember a huge step up when I got a 56K modem.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And we were pushing the limits of copper, plain old telephone system wires, pushing the limits we thought, but by the time I switched to fiber, we already had 20 megabits per second on the same telephone wires that we thought 56K was a stretch.
Yeah, last week I read an article online about NASA, I think, succeeding in communicating with some sort of satellite super far away, like 65 million kilometers, and they had managed to establish a laser link with it. Wow. And they had a higher bit rate than I have over fiber at home, and I was a bit jealous. If they can get more than 100 megabits, whatever, how much it was, over 65 million kilometers, then why can't I get more on my fiber?
Well, that is impressive, because I remember when they landed on Mars in, I think it was 1996, it used to take a couple minutes to download one single photograph from Mars. And now you're saying they're doing, what, 65 megabits?
Yeah, they can do streaming video now from space. From far away
that's
space,
insane.
Just from up there, but from really far away.
Yeah,
they have a better connection.
But I mean, look at us.
Now. Well, what amazes me more than is not the speed, but the fact that they are able to point a laser with that much precision so far away. I mean, if you ever try to take a picture with a telelens, really difficult to keep it in the lens and the object. And so 65 million, the precision must be crazy, but yeah.
You know, it still amazes me that they're able to keep in touch with Voyagers who went past Pluto many million years ago, and somehow they're still going. I don't know how. I mean, they're far away from the sun, so the sun is basically just looks like a star to them. But also the accuracy of training the dish on that tiny, tiny little thing so far away, and yet they're still picking up signals from those things.
Yeah. Electronics can often do more than it's designed for. I was playing with an op-amp, and it was doing exactly what I expected of it. And then suddenly it burned away. Didn't understand until I discovered that actually I had the power supply at way too high. It was rated for 6 volts, and I was much higher. But it worked fine on 9 volts, no problem.
Yeah. I can't say I've had the same luck always. I've had smoke coming out of parts, but you know, that just put that down to my own inexperience. But you are obviously a legend in the Elektor community, having been with the magazine for so long. So you have experience, 6 volts, 9 volts. That's not too much. Reverse polarity, that can sometimes be a problem. And I have design circuits that used, for example, very simple 4 diodes to rectify current. It's not fancy, but you know, it gets the job done in a pinch. How would you recommend to people designing projects? Like, what should your foundational knowledge be before you start trying to design something where you're not expecting the magic smoke to come out?
Well, first of all, you must, of course, define what you want to design and understand how to get there. And don't often burn components. That's usually a matter of power. If you have too much power going around, so I don't know. Check if the parts you had in mind can handle the power.
Yeah.
And you, of course, you have to be careful about unexpected power path. You can, for instance, with a transistor, the current can go through the base and burn it from there. If you forget a resistor, that way you can burn a transistor without noticing, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, be careful. But analog design, yeah, I don't know. You take an op amp and not a lot can go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, the project that I mentioned, building from Elector, prior to having that project, a friend of mine had an Amiga computer, and it was able to capture video or digitize video or put logos over the video, but it would only accept RGB via a D connector. I think it was a 25 pin, but can't remember how many pins it had. It would only accept RGB, not PAL or NTSC. And he had a special box that would convert PAL to RGB. So I borrowed it from him, and the very first time I used it, I used a power supply with an inverted polarity, and that was it. That thing never ever worked again. So I can say more for the Elektor design.
There's always added diet, huh?
Yeah, well, they clearly didn't. It was a professional product. It was very expensive. Wrong polarity, boom, end of story. So
yeah, but I think that's. I mean, originally you had these power supplies; they were all the same with the barrel jack.
Yeah.
Then someone messed up the barrel jack design, and so you got two polarities, and that's when inverse polarity started to happen.
Yeah.
So then from then on, every company put a diode in their equipment. But it's all a matter of people misinterpreting connectors.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a Roland keyboard which runs on 9-volt DC, and it's one of the odd ones where the positive is on the outside of the jack and the negative's on the inside. That is so dangerous.
For me, that's the right way.
For you, that's the right way.
Yes,
but that's the opposite of what most people do.
Yes, because the people, I think some designer made a mistake sometimes. They think, oh, the center pin is ground.
Yeah.
But no, actually the ground is should be the first bit that makes contact. And if you put a barrel jack in its connector, then the outside will make contact first with the little thingy, and then the pin makes contact, and the other way around. So no, I'm messing it up myself. The center pin should be ground. Is that right?
Yeah.
But for people, it's logical to put the plus on the center pin, but it's wrong. For me, that's wrong. Really? And music equipment, guitar, pedals, and all that stuff, they always have the center pin ground, right? So your Roland keyboard, that's a standard in the music industry. So it's not an odd way, it's just the right way, actually.
Good to know that. But when any time I've needed to use that power supply, like for a ZX Spectrum computer, which also uses 9-volt, I always had to cut the cable, swap the wires around. But that's not exactly electronics engineering. But I am surprised to hear from you, Clemens, that you think it's correct to have the negative in the middle.
It's a matter of first contact. The part of the connector that makes first contact, the same with hot swapping, although it's hard drives and things. If you look at the connectors, they have some pads that are longer than others.
Yeah.
And that's all to ensure that the contacts are made in the right order.
Yeah.
And for all these barrel jack, it's the same.
I was going to ask my next question, but I'll save that for a second because I see we have a lot of people watching, but no one's asking any questions. We've had one comment earlier. Maybe it's because this is a bit earlier than usual. Normally we would have this at like 4 p.m. Central European time, but the problem is at the Raspberry Pi event, so we'll have to be doing something else at that time. But for the audience, thank you for joining us from wherever you're joining us around the world. as Clemens told me privately, this is a great time for Australia. So I hope we have some Australians joining us, because this is early for us. It was 8 a.m. for me when we started, 9 a.m. for Clemens. And here I am talking about polarity on barrel jacks with Clemens, which, I mean, I'm wasting his brain here because he's a really remarkable engineer with a great deal of experience with Elektor. And can we have some more intelligent questions from our viewers? But I will jump back to what I was saying. You're saying negative is the point of contact first, but even that doesn't even apply to audio cables like headphones, microphones. The at least on the mini jack or the
audio
ground.
cables and audio. The thing is the shielding, of course.
Yeah,
it's not a matter of contact, but barrel jacks are for power, and everything that has power, you have to establish the power in a certain order, otherwise the circuit may not work.
That makes sense.
The TRS and phone jacks, things like that, they are just for audio, so they get the shield in the right way around the signal.
Yeah,
so that's why audio connectors are the way they are.
And again, to waste your brain, but I'm wondering about this. Have you had a lot of experience with differential audio like XLR jacks and that sort of thing?
Not a lot. I use it, of course, but it's in the professional thing. I have my mixing desk that has XLR connectors, and balanced audio and things like that.
Yeah, so I'm a stickler who would always say connect ground on both ends, but a lot of people recommend, like, you can have different relative voltage levels, especially on a sound stage, or you're doing a music concert, and this desk on this side of the field, and 100 meters away there's this other desk. They connected to different powers. Do not connect the grounds together. Connect the ground on the sending end so it acts as a shield, but keep the differential voltages as the only one actually making connector, because it's all about what's relative.
Yeah, that's why you often have the ground lift switch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, grounding is a big problem. When I worked on ships, they're all of metal, and then you think the whole thing is one big metal conductor, but you could have huge potential differences between on the ground, even though it was all metal and with, I mean, you have a lot of contact, but still, so you have to be very careful with grounding and shielding and all that stuff. So we shielded only on one side.
Yeah, it's kind of like a potato battery when you mention that. The potential is different on both ends of the ship. Okay, now to move away from the simple stuff that I can at least understand when you talk about it, let's get a bit more complicated. What are some of your favorite projects that you've done while you've been with Elektor?
My favorite projects that I did myself or that I saw at Elector?
Well, both, but because you have such a wealth of experience in creating projects and circuits for Elektor, what did you most enjoy?
Well, what I liked a lot was when I started at Elektor, I got a lot of freedom. And so I set out to design a microcontroller board with Bluetooth on it. It was called, I called it the Scepter. And that was when I was still motivated to write software for that kind of stuff. And so I designed the whole board and everything and wrote a big library for it. And that was a fun job, and it was really satisfying when I got an email out from Australia from someone who said that he bought 10 of them because he wanted to try them in their home or something. And so that's satisfying to know that somebody is using your work. My interest goes out to audio music stuff, so I tinker a lot with music things, synthesizer and all that. And
so you're
I did publish a synthesizer. I have it here too. This one. It's a
cool
NXP based. I ported the code from an other project.
Does it have MIDI? Or is it a standalone synthesizer?
No, it has MIDI. Of course, it has MIDI.
Okay. Oh, you get these standalone ones where you can tweak the knobs. There's a resurgence in analog synths, so a lot of them don't have MIDI, but that's pretty cool that you made that.
Actually, I bought one. I haven't built it yet. You can see it.
Oh.
It's a modular synthesizer for less than €300. And
it's not the Elektor Formant, is it?
Yes, but in much cheaper and much smaller.
Yeah.
And probably better. But that one doesn't seem to have MIDI. So I have to add MIDI to it myself.
Well, to be fair, the Elektor Formant also didn't have MIDI, but legendary synthesizer nonetheless. And I had a MIDI.
MIDI didn't exist, so.
Yeah. I mean, that was more 80s 5-pin DIN connectors, but now they also have USB. And in 1994, I bought a MIDI keyboard. I didn't understand much about the protocol. It turns out it's actually quite simple. It's serial, like we were talking about earlier. It's just a weird clock rate. And this keyboard that I bought had a built-in synthesizer. So I didn't understand keyboard synthesizer, same thing. But then I tried to dry some clothing that was in the washing machine and wasn't dry yet. So I stuck it on the keyboard and I put a hairdryer on because my kid needed to get to school. Melted the keys on this Roland. That's the Roland I'm talking about, JB30. So I needed to replace it. So I ended up with an M Audio key station, which has full 88 keys, which I love, like a piano, because some of the things I wanted to play, there wasn't enough bass. Problem is, it's just a keyboard. There's no synthesizer. So once I realized that, I'm still trying to think of what cool projects we could make where you've got 88 keys to play with. What do you trigger with each one? It could be lighting. It could be fireworks. See, I'm going off into fantasy land here with MIDI, but have you done a lot of MIDI work?
Yes, I've played a lot with MIDI to control synthesizers, to control stuff. Yeah. And with MIDI is always this isolation thing that when you want to measure it, you always have to solder things to it. And so when I use MIDI, I immediately make it fully isolated so I can have access to all the signals. But yes, I've done a lot with MIDI.
That's cool. And not just music. Do you ever get quirky and control other things with MIDI?
No, not really. I have a synthesizer that has, it's a Roland also, JX83P.
Yeah.
Classic. That one has a program box with the potentiometer on it. It was one of the first digitally controlled synthesizers. It's an analog synthesizer, but its control is digital, and so it's very hard to program. And so they issued a box with all the knobs, with a separate box. And that box uses its own protocol, and so that's the only time I think I really try to get MIDI take over that the protocol of that box.
Yeah. Watch the space though. I've got this useless keyboard. It's not useless. It's a nice keyboard, but it doesn't make any sounds whatsoever. So I'm trying to get yourself
an expander, and then there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it's easy enough. Connect it to a PC. But you know, the app's on the PC, and then there's lag, and then you try to use Bluetooth headphones, and then you have a delay. So I really want to try and use something, maybe even a bit of AI, where you can punch in a couple of notes on the keyboard, and then the AI will listen to the notes. Well, listen, I say, but and then maybe have an accompaniment to what you're playing.
Yeah, I think you have that on the Raspberry Pi. You can connect your keyboard to the Raspberry Pi. It can run a soft synth on the Pi, and I saw some AI stuff to create, I don't know, arpeggios or something. So you should check out the Raspberry Pi, I would say. Raspberry Pi, you won't get much latency, even on a computer and a normal laptop. If you switch off all the unnecessary software, you don't have a lot of latency. You have to have a lot of latency in the past, but today it's all so fast. But if for your keyboard, if you just want to synthesize, just get yourself an expander. You can buy them online. I can send you one. I have a bunch here that I want to get rid of.
When you say an expander, is that something that makes audio, generates audio?
The expander is it's like we have headless oscilloscopes. It's a keyboardless synthesizer. So
Okay.
it's just in my case, it's all 19-inch rack. It's just a black box. It's like looks a bit like a hi-fi equipment, and it has MIDI, but you don't have the keyboard. So sorry.
I've been looking for a keyboardless synthesizer. I never knew it was called an expander.
Oh yeah, there are plenty of those. Most synthesizers today, they are issued with and without keyboard. That's already they already started doing that in the 80s, because you got so many keyboards and they take up a lot of space. So instead of having all these keyboards, you just have a rack of expanders.
Yeah.
And one keyboard. And then with one keyboard you control everything. And well, you could have 3 keyboards if you like left, right, in front of you, or a stack. But you don't want 50 keyboards.
Exactly. You just need one keyboard. In fact, sometimes you need 0 keyboards. When I was playing Doom back in the 90s, you had this FM wavetable synthesis on the sound card on the PC itself, but there was also a MIDI output. So I used to plug that into my Roland keyboard, and it would play the music via the keyboard. Nobody needed to touch a key, play the game, and there was the Doom music, which was pretty legendary to me. But yeah, Clemens does have a musical side to him, which is sometimes hidden, sometimes shown in the engineering world. But for me, when I was with Clemens last year, I mentioned a song which is an Italian song, which is, well, it's by an Italian. Okay, it's not in Italian. It's a gibberish song, but it sounds like English when you listen to it. It's called Prisen Kolonensinal Qsl. I could not spell that for you, but Clemens was the one guy. You still have that on LP, don't you?
Single, yes. 45 RPM.
Okay, so not an LP, but yeah, I mean, this guy's got the original. I mean, that's pretty rare at this stage.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. I have it somewhere behind me.
You're a hoarder like me. I can turn around and pull out a VHS tape from 1992 in the cupboard behind me.
Hoarder, I try not to hoard because it takes up a lot of space, and so I'm continuously throwing stuff out.
Yeah, and you're in Europe, so you don't have the luxury of space as much as we do in, for example, South Africa.
No, I have a lack of space, but at the same time, that's good, because if I had more space, then I would fill it up with useless stuff.
That's it's a bit of a problem for me. I mean, I can't go and look at a good VCR in South Africa without buying it. But like, for example, I've got my Facebook Marketplace set to London at the moment. People are practically pay you to take this stuff off their hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say hi before we say bye to Christian. Thanks, Christian. I know it's early in the morning, so we don't have a lot of activity on the chat, but obviously this video will be available to everyone at elektor.tv, which will just redirect you to our YouTube channel, and you can watch this edition of Elektor Engineering Insights. The time, again, is a weird time. It's early in the morning for Europe, because I'm at the Raspberry Pi event where they're taking us through the latest developments here at Raspberry Pi, and as you see, preparing for a presentation. But I won't give away any secrets. I'm about to go into that. And yeah, so it's fascinating for me. I'm more of a Raspberry Pi guy, so I'm the Raspberry Pi guy. Clemens likes his Arduino. I like both, actually, but it depends on the application. So Raspberry Pi is coming. Yeah?
I'm using only the ESP32.
Yes, that's you've just introduced that's the third leg to the tripod.
Yeah, that's what I use now.
Yeah, and that's great as well. To use the Arduino IDE for that. We are over time, so I'm going to have to wrap this up shortly. But I just want to see how you're developing on ESP, C++ or Arduino IDE.
Of course, C++ in the Arduino IDE. I don't.
Okay.
I hate CMake. That all complicated, incomprehensible garbage system. I do everything in the IDE. It's a bit simple, but at least it works. So yeah, don't no headaches with make files and all that stuff. Just the ESP32 in the Arduino IDE. I don't use version 2. I still use the old version.
Yeah, the new version. You're kind of like me in that once you found software that works, you stick to it, because you're still using PaintShop Pro, which it took a lot for me to move from that to Photoshop. But you know, got to do what you got to do. And I also prefer the older Arduino IDEs. Question from Peter, and this is more for me than for you. Sorry about that, Clemens. But Peter wants to know when we are reporting on the Raspberry Pi event. Well, as it happens, you know, I'm trying to get enough information here for you and bring it out to you as it happens. But this show is not about me. This is about Clemens, one of the legends of Elektor, who's been here for a long time, and he has a variety of interests, from analog to music to MIDI to Arduino and Rabbit. I've never worked with Rabbit, but 6502 Z80 based Rabbit, 8051, which I've used, and PIC, of course. I used PIC for digital things. Wasn't too successful with the analog things, but Clemens, you've been around from the beginning to the end. Well, it's not the end yet, but I mean, from the beginning till 2024, you're using the latest stuff, and you were using some of the earlier stuff. Are you encouraged by how far we've come and how far electronics has moved in the last, I don't know, speaking for my own age, in the last 40 years, since the 80s?
Encouraged. Well, I always used electronics to solve problems. So there was a way to get things that I could not pay for. So that's why I evolved in electronics. And then when I started working, you had this magazine, EPN, Electronic Product News, that you could subscribe to, a free magazine. And it was always full of new products, only new products. And that always got me very excited, all these products that I wanted to try. And so that's how I moved on. I don't know what to say to this question.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it has changed a lot, electronics. I still miss the digital logic from the past. I really like that, but you cannot really. I like to play with gates and counters and all that stuff, but you cannot justify doing that today if you can do everything with one 8-bit microcontroller for 10 cents. So that's the thing, but you don't have to write software, and I still like to play with gates.
Yeah. Although for educational uses, like we have some famous Elektor classics, like the quasi-analog clock, which it's a kit that you build at home, and we had quite a lot of interest when I displayed that here, even though it's not Raspberry Pi related, but we had it here on our table, and people were like, "Wow, I can bring that home and show my kid how logic gates work," which nobody gets anymore. Should they get it? I don't know. I'm just an old guy saying nobody gets it anymore, but do they need to? Do they really, when you can just write it in the
No, I don't hear you anymore.
Well, I'm not muted as far as I know.
There you are.
Final comment from Peter, and thanks for joining us, Peter. He has enjoyed the chat this morning, which means he's from nearby. Peter Gilbert, let me guess, UK, but it's an hour later where Clemens is. Enjoy the chat, all by chance. Thanks. Yes, me too. I mean, we didn't have a script for what we're going to talk about with Clemens, but he comes with a wealth of experience and many years at Elector, and he's designed circuits, and he knows how not to blow up a barrel jack in the wrong polarity, which I wish I could say for myself. Anyway, Clemens, we have gone 10 minutes over time, so I apologize for spending too much time with you. But as always, I find it very inspiring to talk with you because you've done a lot more in the electronics world, your creations, than I have. So I aspire to one day get to your level. I probably won't ever, but you are an inspiration anyway. Thank you very much, Clemens, for joining me this morning.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I hope you have a good show in London. And
Yeah.
tomorrow at the Sony factory.
Yes, indeed. I'm not sure it's a secret, but Raspberry Pi will be taking me to see, Peter Gilbert, South Wales. That's exactly where I will be later today and tomorrow to tour the Sony factory in South Wales, not far from Cardiff, actually. So I'll get to see the ins and outs of how Raspberry Pi is made. So thank you for everyone who joined us at this weird time and on this impromptu tablet story. I mean, there's a presentation going on behind me, so let me not interrupt that and relying on the Wi-Fi in this building. But thanks for everyone who's joining us. I see there are quite a lot of you. It's a quiet crowd, not a lot of comments, but thank you, Peter Gilbert. Thank you, Christian, and for everyone else who commented today. And thanks most of all to Clemens for bringing his wealth of experience to the chat. I know we spoke about magazine publishing, but you know that's a mutual interest of ours. But it's not quite a lot of you tuned in. Still, you might enjoy the ins and outs and the background of Elektor publishing, seeing that it goes back 60 years. So, Clemens, once again, thanks for joining us and thanks for sharing us your experiences.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and have a good day, have a good show, and bring back some good news. Huh?
Yes, I will definitely bring back some news. I need to check out now and go check out the other presentations before I miss out on some news. So thanks, Clemens, and thanks to everyone joining us from all around the world on this impromptu tablet edition of Elektor Engineering Insights. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Okay, goodbye.